welcome to Kinks and Beats Daily. This is your host, Tony Fry. I thank you for downloading yet another episode of this never-ending podcast. And I say never-ending because we're going to cover every Kinks and Beatles song, both as a band and as the individual solo artists, until we're out of songs. And then we're going to find other things to cover, plus the albums, plus, things they guested on. And we've got at least one of these people releasing a new album next month. So there's a never-ending supply of songs. This is episode 188. We're talking about When You Were a Child by the Kinks. This tune was released November 17th, 1986 on the album Think Visual. And it closes the album, and it's one of the two Dave Davies compositions. And I think Dave, on this track in particular, turns in a really solid vocal. A lot of the times when he's singing on these types of loud rockers, he tends to go into his head voice, which is harder to control. And I think it's harder to get a good recording of in the studio with anybody. But he manages to find the sweet spot on here and kind of stays out of his head voice except for some background harmonies. And it sounds really good on this track. I'm not a huge fan of the production of the song. The 1980s period of almost any band I like is tough to listen to, with the exception of maybe Elvis Costello. It can be tough, and that's not a criticism of the Kinks or this song. It's a criticism of 1980s music because the Kinks are actually kind of expertly doing this production. I don't like this style, but they are doing it perfectly, and that's something they kind of always did. They were either inventing a style like they were in the early days with You Really Got Me, or they were adapting their style to fit, what was going on in the latest trends. The reason Sunny Afternoon doesn't sound anything like Lola, which doesn't sound anything like Low Budget, which doesn't sound anything like this song, is because they were adapting to the times. And the Kinks, more than most bands of their generation, were able to metamorphosize. Is that the right way to say that? They were able to adapt and change their sound to fit what was going on, or completely ignore what was going on. It all depended on their mood. They could release a song like this that sounds very of its time and hits all the check marks for being radio friendly in that period, and then the next song on the album might be a 1920s vaudeville record. So I think that's kind of what makes the Kinks tough for some people to dig into, because they don't know which era to go. There's not a uniform sound through the catalog, but that's also what makes them cool and what makes it easy to listen to them so much. Because, if I'm in the mood for their 60s stuff or I'm in the mood for their 70s stuff, they're very different periods. It's a long digression to say that this song sounds very much like it was recorded in 1986. I don't like a lot of recordings from 1986, but they nailed it on this. And actually, Dave is credited as the producer on this track and his other track, Rock and Roll Cities, which was a single off of this album. Dave himself listed this song among 5 songs that didn't get the credit or attention they were due. He did an interview promoting his album Open Road that he did with his son, and the interviewer asked for 5 songs that he thought deserved more attention from the Kinks catalog, and he picked 3 of his own and 2 of Ray's. And of the 5 songs, 4 of them were from the 1980s or later. So obviously, Dave, to this day, thinks that later period Kinks material was better than maybe the reviewers thought it, maybe the record buying public thought of it, maybe even Kinks fans. And he lists this song among it. He explains in the interview that, we grow up too quickly and we need to revisit parts of our growing up, to go back and have a look around again and to look at the trees again. And he was apparently attempting to go back into his younger days through this song, which is something he and Ray would attempt many times, sometimes while still very young themselves. You get a 22-year-old Ray Davies, writing on the from the viewpoint of a 60-year-old looking back at his 20s. Harmonically, there's not much to discuss on this song. The song is more about the guitar riffs than the actual chords being played. He's mainly focusing on the keys of C and F as his home keys, and he stays there more or less through the entire song. But the guitar riffs are what makes the harmony feel like it's moving through a lot more chords than it's actually at its basic structure than it's actually moving to. I'm a bit surprised that this wasn't released as a single, actually, or at least as a B-side, because it seems like the production alone could have had some legs on the radio. It fits, and it's a good rocker. It's a cool. It works well as an album closer, but it's a good little rocker. And if I were to change one thing and keep it relevant to 1986, I would have added some lead guitar work. The song clocks in at less than 4 minutes. It feels like it moves a lot faster than that. I wouldn't have guessed that it's more than 3.5 minutes long. But you kind of want a screaming Dave Davies guitar solo on this one. Now, if I was to change a few things to take it out of its 1986 relevance, I would have reproduced the whole thing. But that's neither here nor there. So it's a good rocker. You may not know it. Think Visual is not an album that you hear referred to often, even among Kinks fans. But there is a lot of good work on there. We've talked about a few songs off that album already. And this is the album closer. So, I mean, it's an easy one to miss, but I think it's worth listening to. It is on our playlist now. If you go to Spotify, there's a Kinks and Beats daily playlist that's got all the songs we've covered. And I did get a voicemail from one of our listeners saying that he's discovered a couple songs, including his new favorite George Harrison song, based on that playlist. So I hope that you guys enjoy that and are checking that out. That's about all I got for this tune. If Dave is listening and would like to chat more about it, you are welcome to join me on this podcast at any time. And all of you listeners are welcome to join me on this podcast. All you have to do is leave me a voicemail at 925-494-1739, and we will play them. I stockpile them, and we will do bonus episodes with your messages to the podcast. Also, I'm looking for people to tell me about a song from the catalogs of the Kinks or Beatles that they've changed their opinion on. How have you changed your opinion? What sparked the opinion change? And obviously, what song is it? Leave that voicemail as well. And if you are ever looking for more information about this podcast, everything you need to know can be found at herohabit.com. Make sure to join our group on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and all that stuff. So this is kind of a short one, but not a lot of information about these songs exists. There's not a ton of liner notes about it. The one interview I found with Dave was about the only thing I found in discussion about it. And, there's not a lot written about the recording process on these, on some of these tunes. And this is one that there's not a lot to talk about, really. It's a good song. Check it out. Tell me what you think. All right. I will see you guys next time. Make sure you are subscribed and leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you download your podcasts. All right. Take care. This podcast is presented by the Hero Habit Podcast Network. Swing by HeroHabit.com today to comment on this episode and poke around our growing database of sports and pop culture news, reviews, and collectibles. HeroHabit.com. Collect your heroes.